young men washing everything in the lake, but I couldn't say anything as I was a woman travelling alone in my self-contained van.
Well, if they don't like the smell, but they're happy to leave their toilet paper and what have you on out on the parks.
Go figure.
That doesn't make sense.
But we couldn't confirm today that there are any of those van companies giving you a refund on an unused toilet, which would seem bizarre. And several companies denied they do this. New Zealand Motor Caravan Association CEO Bruce Lahore says if this practice is going on, to let his organisation know, or let us know, but he's thinking it's more likely that porta potties returned dirty incur a charge.
Yeah, but either way, there's a money thing involved, and I understand why, because you have to empty it and clean it if you're the company that has one in there. So whether it be a refund or whether it be a charge if it's dirty, it's a motivation not to use it. That's just splitting
right.
hairs, that one.
The incentives are in the wrong place.
Yeah.
Road safety again. We concentrated yesterday on motorcycle deaths. We gave you some pretty chilling sounding stats. You are 21 times more likely to be seriously injured or killed on a motorbike than in a car. And that applies particularly to middle-aged people between the age of 40 and 59. A couple of listener comments. Visibility. As a 60-year-old motorcyclist who's been riding continuously for 45 years, my two major accidents were caused by car drivers, one resulting in a leg amputation, says Pete from Pleasant Point. I ride a bright yellow Triumph with a bright yellow jacket. Do both of you see motorcyclists?
Not always. Not always. They're more. Every car has a split-second blind spot, and a big motorcycle being smaller gets more obscured in it, and it's as basic as that. And you do see, cyclists taking risks between when the traffic is jammed up, and they'll go between and stuff like that. And only needs someone to move a little bit and to knock them over. But they're on two wheels. A car can't get. You're more protected. Its logic says you're going to be. If you are hit, you're more likely to be hurt badly. It's a logical thing. I don't know what you do, because motorcycles are good in terms of traffic flow and even the environment, I suppose, slightly less emissions and what have you. Yeah. So I'm not sure the solution doesn't discourage motorcycle use, but its logic says it's going to be a problem.
Heather?
Yeah, no, I agree. Sometimes you don't see them, and that is problematic. I suspect that motorbike riders are much safer drivers in that respect of cars than those people who aren't. But are we talking about banning them from roads? I think that's an overreaction.
No, we're talking about, there are all sorts of suggestions.
Is it high vis? Do they have to wear a high vis jacket when you're riding a motorcycle?
Well, retraining, not becoming a middle-aged and then deciding to ride an 1100cc motorbike the way you did when you were young, all those kinds of things.
Yeah, the problem is that I think you discussed this yesterday, Jim, that the fault is often the car's fault rather than the motorcyclists.
Which brings us to the second point that I just want to make among the many that people sent in. Someone says, I would like to see a line graph since 2010 charting the correlation between the road toll and smartphone ownership, whether it's actually using them or just thinking about them. I would like to see that graph too, wouldn't you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's got I went into the back of someone at about walking pace in traffic just over a year ago, and I wasn't even using my phone. I just glanced down at it. Wasn't on it. Just went, I sent any message. And the traffic in front of me and stuff. And I was driving a friend's car, and the bumper in front went through the radiator, and I wrote the car off at walking pace.
Really?
I wrote my friend's car off. The car in front was fine. They clipped a bit of plastic and was fine. So, yeah, of course it causes more accidents, yeah.
Yeah, it distracts people. And look, when the law first came in, people were pretty good. But now, I'm amazed at how often I see people quite openly talking on cell phones as they drive around.
So that's bad, but the real problem is texting. That is 1,000 times worse than talking on it.
Before we go, naming a chocolate smoothie ghetto girl. Why would you do that? Auckland food truck business Blitzed sells smoothies in Ponsonby Central. We couldn't get hold of them today. A cacao, peanut butter, banana and chocolate smoothie was named Ghetto Girl. An apology has been issued. Any comment?
Yeah, you wonder if they're just doing it now and know they're going to cop a bit of flack, but they've got their publicity being talked on shows like this.
That's right, we're talking about it. It worked.
It is that era, so you suspect that could be.
Maybe just don't talk about them, Jim.
Let's worry about things that really matter.
People like yourself, mate, don't talk about it.
I'm not talking about anything anymore. I'm going home.
Don't talk about Get a Girl.
Andrew Clay, thank you. Always a pleasure. And Heather Roy, nice to have you on, Heather.
Thank you.
That is us for another day. We're back tomorrow. Thanks, everybody, and Checkpoint is coming up.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Batten aho. The driver of a bus which crashed on Christmas Eve 2016, killing 3 people, has been sentenced to 5.5 months home detention. 66-year-old Talakai Aholele was behind the wheel when the bus, with 53 people on board, plunged down a steep bank south of Gisborne. Sarah Robson was in court for the sentencing.
The bus was carrying a school brass band that was on a 4-week fundraising tour from Tonga. Last year, Aholele pleaded guilty to 3 charges of careless driving causing death and 27 charges of careless driving causing injury. This afternoon, Judge June Jealous sentenced him to 5.5 months home detention and suspended his licence for 2 years. Aholele has also paid $36,000 in reparations. The courtroom was packed with Aholele's supporters, members of the victims' families and some of those who were on board the bus. From the Waitakere District Court, ko Sarah Robson, aho.
New Zealand First will now support the new TPP trade deal as the necessary changes have been negotiated. At APEC last year, New Zealand negotiated changes including the ability of the government to restrict house sales to foreign buyers and to the clauses allowing investors to sue the government. The 11 member countries have reached agreement and are expected to sign the deal on March the 8th. The New Zealand First leader Winston Peters says his party would never have backed the protection racket advocated by the national government.
I was concerned, and New Zealand was concerned about other aspects where we would maintain our sovereignty, we would have our right to determine who buys in our country, and the investor disputes clause has been substantially changed. That's what we're concerned about.
Winston Peters. The Greens will not vote for the enabling legislation, but National will give the government the numbers to pass it. A week-long heat wave has begun in Wanaka as the record-setting summer continues. Met Surfers is forecasting highs for the next week in the central Otago town at or above 30 degrees. A Met Service meteorologist Tom Adams says winds over the South Island will turn to the north and combine to create what's called a foehn heating. Mr Adams says that will create a fresh burst of extremely hot, dry weather.
In Wanaka, you'd expect the maximum temperature to average out about 24 degrees in January. So when we see 7 days of 30 degrees, that does meet that criteria for a heat wave.
Tom Adams says much of the country will be hot, though Auckland and northern areas will be more humid and uncomfortable. The search for missing Californian Tyler Nee has been suspended. The 27-year-old is presumed drowned after plunging into Lake Wakatipu during a tandem skydive earlier this month. Our Otago Southland reporter Timothy Brown reports.
Police have searched 24 billion litres of water in the hope of finding Mr Nee. But after 2 weeks and the use of sonar equipment to plunge the depths of Lake Wakatipu, that search has borne no fruit. Otago Lake Central Area Commander Inspector Olaf Jansen says the outcome is disappointing. Mr Jansen says searches have been operating at a depth of 340 metres. The Sky Tower, New Zealand's tallest building, is only 328. Mr Nee's family will return to the US tomorrow. The family says search efforts have been outstanding, as has the support of New Zealanders throughout this tragic time. This is Timothy Brown.
The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, and her government have been warmly welcomed onto Ratana Pa, with the church even suggesting a middle name for her baby. Government and opposition MPs are at Ratana near Whanganui today for the church's annual festivities celebrating its founder's birthday. Our political reporter Craig McCulloch is at Ratana.
Ms Ardern would have been expecting a warm welcome at Ratana, but the gift of a baby name was a surprise. The Ratana Speaker, Andre Mason, suggested the name Waru, the te reo word for 8. Ms Ardern joked the name was not the first suggested to her, before listing the name of some of her colleagues, including Winston Peters. The National leader, Bill English, addressed the church this afternoon, cautioning them not to let the new government undermine their self-determination. From Ratana, Craig McCulloch.
Protesters are calling for the chair of Te Papa to stand down, claiming a housing development of his is causing environmental damage to a marine reserve in Auckland. A small group gathered outside the museum today to deliver a letter asking for the museum's chair, Evan Williams, to be removed from his position. The group's leader, Jeff Reid, says he and others have had enough of the development causing sediment to go into the Long Bay Okura Marine Reserve and choke marine life. Evan Williams says he spent millions protecting the waterway and what the group says is wrong. It's 5:05. Sport, and the German tennis star Angelique Kerber remains in contention for her second Australian Open's women's singles crown. 2016 champion Kerber hammered American Madison Keys 6-1, 6-2 in their quarter-final in Melbourne this afternoon, setting up a semi-final with the winner of tonight's match between top seed Simona Halep and 6th seed Karolina Pliskova. Despite her favouritism, Romanian star Halep says she hasn't begun to picture herself claiming a first Grand Slam title.
I have no expectations here because of the ankle. What happened in the first round was not easy, but now I'm just getting more relaxed. I'm getting used to the pain, and I'm just trying to win the match that I play. I don't think about next round.
Simona Halep. Meanwhile, in the men's singles, South Korea's Hyung Chung has taken the first set in his quarter-final against another unseeded player, American Tennis Sangren. The winner of the contest will face whoever prevails in tonight's last remaining quarter-final between defending champion and second seed Roger Federer and 19th seed Thomas Berdych. And tickets have sold at record-breaking pace for the New Zealand boxer Joseph Parker's world heavyweight title unification bout with British rival Anthony Joshua. Tickets for the fight at Cardiff's Principality Stadium went on sale overnight on Tuesday, and more than 70,000 were snapped up within just 5 hours. The venue is where Wales play the All Blacks and has a capacity of 78,000 for a boxing bout. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, we hear from some young, gifted New Zealanders. This week's overseas correspondent, Will Flockton, is on the line from Brighton, England, which is still part of Europe, to the dismay of some, and represents self-help guru Dexter Gruff.
Let's do this.
D. This is going to be fun. I dare you to listen. It's time. E. On your mental treadmill.
Maximise your personal brand with Dexter Gruff. He's part of Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Te reo Irarangi o Aotearoa, funded through New Zealand On Air. Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland, fine apart from isolated afternoon and evening showers. Auckland to Taranaki, including Coromandel and Taumarunui. Cloudy periods increasing. Patchy drizzle tomorrow and isolated afternoon showers. Bay of Plenty, Taupo and Taihape, also Gisborne and Hawke's Bay. Fine apart from isolated afternoon and evening showers, possibly thundery with localised downpours. Whanganui to Wellington, fine, but areas of cloud morning and evening and isolated showers inland today. Wairarapa, Nelson and Marlborough, fine apart from afternoon and evening showers about the Marlborough Ranges, possibly heavy tomorrow. Buller, cloudy periods. Westland, occasional rain, clearing tomorrow. Canterbury, fine, but cloud increasing later tomorrow with isolated showers, some heavy and possibly thundery. Otago, except Clutha, cloudy periods and isolated showers, some heavy and possibly thundery tomorrow. Fiordland, Southland and Clutha, occasional rain, and the Chatham Islands, occasional drizzle and fog. It's 8 minutes past 5.
Ko te mai rā I hoa mā, he kōrero kei te haere, he kaupapa kei te karawhiua. Welcome to Checkpoint everyone for Wednesday the 24th of January. Thank you for joining us tonight. We're at Ratana, we're looking at water in the south, Nova Pay 3 years on, and the teacher being asked to refund sick pay, and Jane Patterson on the TPP agreement. All of that coming up. But we begin with the weather. Today, the next few days, and the next few decades. It's hot, record-breaking hot in some places, and in broad terms with the capacity for wild variation, this is what the future will feel like, and trending warmer. Coming up, we explore the future with Dr. Judy Lawrence, Senior Research Fellow at the Climate Change Research Institute and co-chair of the Climate Change Adaptation Technical Working Group. It is a sobering interview that is just ahead. But let's begin with the here and now. Chris Brandolino, Principal Scientist Forecasting at NIWA, with the very obvious fact it is indeed unusually hot.
We've been looking at temperatures, mean temperatures for the month of January. Some places like Auckland and Whanuapai or Auckland, Western Springs, Motat, looking at their warmest mean January temperature on record. Records still do vary, going back to some places 40s and 1960s. Mangere right now is on track for their second warmest January on record, with mean temperatures 2.4 degrees above the long-term average. And it's not just the upper North Island. It's right the way through. Kelburn on track. That's Wellington on track for the warmest January on record, with the mean temperatures so far through 22 days more than 3 degrees above average. And it's, of course, the South Island also seeing some very warm temperatures, and some places seeing temperatures 3 to 4 degrees warmer than what they usually are during the month of January.
Right, these are extraordinary figures, and the one that's been gripping me is temperatures north of 30 in Invercargill. Is that stuff we've just not seen much before ever?
No, you don't see much of that at all. I mean, and you mentioned Invercargill. They're on track for their warmest January on record. Records go back to 1905. They're looking at 3.3 degrees at the moment above the January long-term average. That may fluctuate as we go through the month. May go higher, may go lower. And this is coming off, let me remind the listeners that this is coming off the second warmest December on record for the country. So NIWA uses a 7-station series. That's our way of evaluating the nation's temperature, not individual locations. We take 7 stations, as the name would suggest, from the top to the bottom, and we average them out, and we get a kind of a nationwide indication of what the flavor was for a particular month. December was the second hottest on record, and records go back to 1909, and 2017 was the 5th warmest year on record for New Zealand using the aforementioned 7-station series.
And 2016 was the warmest, wasn't it? Am I right there?
That's right. Yeah, that's right. So you have 2 years. That's an excellent point. You have 2 years, top 5 finishes. So a dubious distinction, I suppose.
Yeah, and where are we heading? What are we heading? What are we looking for if you are able to look into the crystal ball for us? How's February looking?
Well, let's talk about the rest of January, if I can. So this weekend, so it's going to be hot. So tomorrow on Thursday, looking at some of our forecasts for tomorrow, a lot of places across the South Island will be quite warm, low 30s, likely Alexandra. Likewise, we'll find temperatures near 30. Ranfurly, Queenstown will be quite warm tomorrow, 28, maybe nearing 30. And Christchurch, 32 likely, at least for tomorrow. And some places in the South Island may get as high as 35, 36 degrees in the east of the South Island. Interior sections, North Island, Masterton tomorrow could approach 32, 36 degrees. Wouldn't be surprised, a bit of a respite on Friday, slightly cooler. We're talking slightly. Then I think it's the real heat, the apex. That'll come over the weekend into Monday and Tuesday, a long weekend for the upper North Island, where temperatures will likely could be the hottest air of the summer coming for the South Island. Not so much the North Island. The humidity will be for the North Island, but for the South Island, in particular interior sections, the weekend, and especially Monday, Tuesday, we're talking mid-30s for many locations, and I think this will really be the climax of the heat as we work away into the latter half of the weekend into early next week.
Gosh, they're phenomenal temperatures, and in the context of the year temperatures in 17 and 16, they are sobering, aren't they? And the other thing, can we talk about nighttime temperatures? It's just simply not getting cool, is it?
Yeah, well, that's right. This is a function of humidity. So when we're an island nation, and we're really susceptible to how the seas go around us. And the seas have been unusually warm going back to November. They continue to be unusually warm. So that kind of keeps us warm. We kind of bask in that warmth, if you will. But more importantly, perhaps, our air, because of La Nina is a global climate driver. Just like economists look for drivers that will drive the economy, spending, so on and so forth, meteorologists, climatologists look for things that drive the weather day to day, and La Nina, which is the opposite of El Nino, is one of them. When we have La Nina, we get a lot of north and northeast winds, and that's not a cold wind. You don't have to be a rocket scientist or a NIWA scientist to know that. If your air is coming from a lower latitude to the north in our part of the world, that's coming from the tropics and subtropics. That carries warmth, that carries humidity, and that's what we have been seeing for a good part of the summer. And the humidity is really starting to be a real big issue, and it doesn't cool off on that because of that humidity. And that really prolongs the effects. I mean, it's one thing if it's hot during the day, but if you can get some relief during the overnight, it kind of, kind of sets you up for at least a bit of a break, but it hasn't happened.
Thanks, Chris. So this is extraordinary. That's just the rest of January. I don't know how far into February you can see. What can you tell us about February?
We're looking at a very active start to the month of February, potentially very active. We're going to be watching the tropics. The conditions for tropical cyclones and overall storminess will be ramping up late January, early February, and that could produce not only more humid conditions, but locally, well, not even locally, widespread heavy rain events are a distinct possibility as you work away into the start of February. That's something we need to keep our eyes on first half of Feb.
That's Chris Brandolino, who's the principal scientist forecasting at NIWA. So that is the here and now. In a moment, we are going to look big picture, climate change and what is happening to New Zealand over the next few decades. But before that, Auckland's Mission Bay Beach a short time ago. Zach Fleming and our cameraman Nick Munro were there, and they asked beachgoers what they make of all the heat.
Too hot for me to deal with, but everyone else is enjoying it. The wife and the kids are out there in the water. They're having a ball. It's a lot hotter than it has been, yeah, and years been gone. Yeah, definitely.
Are you worried about that continuing? I mean,
well, I'm down home because we haven't got any rain and we need rain badly. So yeah, it may continue. I don't know.
How bad do you need it?
Desperately. Farmers are going dry and things aren't looking too flash at the moment down there in the Naki.
So if we said 2020 election, would climate change be one of your big concerns?
Probably is, yes. Yep, would be. Yep, for sure.
I love being hot because if it's going to be summer, you might as well have some heat because we have a horrible winter and lots of rain, and it's nice to finally be able to just relax and enjoy the heat.
Is this too much heat?
I think you need, yeah, because you can only take it in small doses, especially with the little kids. So, and getting dehydrated quite easily. So that's why we had a swim. And now we've just got an ice cream and sitting under the tree and it's fantastic.
Well, I'm finding it very humid. It's the humidity that gets me, and it really makes you feel very tired.
I burn easier, and I don't normally burn back in the UK. But here I find I'm burning quite easy.
This is muggy, yeah. This is different. This climate's different than we've had before. Reminds me of the tropics more.
And the modelling and the science and the year-on-year trends tell us unequivocally it's getting hotter. Now, Dr. Judy Lawrence is Senior Research Fellow at the Climate Change Research Institute at Victoria University and co-chair of the Climate Change Adaptation Technical Working Group. And what she wants us to think about is that what we know, what we've grown up with, how it was, isn't how it's going to be.
The climate is moving outside the range that we're used to. And that's with respect to temperature, rainfall, and all the sorts of climatic responses that we're currently adapted to and used to. So we're going to get greater variability, and also with a hotter atmosphere, it holds more water, so we're going to get more floods, and a hotter ocean is going to expand, and that means sea level rise is going to affect us. And that means, in turn, that the coastal communities will be flooded more frequently and our roads along harbours will be flooded more frequently, that sort of thing. But what's really important to think about, if we're going to anticipate some of these changes and how we might cope with them in the future, is to think about them as cascading impacts, because one impact is going to affect something else in our lives. And I'll give you a wee example. For instance, as we get hotter in the agriculture sector, for instance, we're going to get more pests and diseases, we're going to get more droughts, more fire risk. That's going to have an impact on our ability to respond in our fire services. It's going to affect people who work outside, our seasonal workers. So we need to think about what are the flow-on effects of an impact like heat right through the system that we live in. And that will occur right across all sectors. It will affect all our natural forests, our freshwater, our coast, our marine environment, and the urban environments that we live in, and the way in which we build our houses, where we build them, and so forth. And if you think about some of the medical implications of heat, for example, in Europe in 2003, there were 35,000 attributable deaths to the heat wave. Now, more extremes are going to lie ahead. Now, while we're not suggesting that that sort of number of people will be affected in New Zealand, certainly vulnerable groups in society are going to be more affected by heat, elderly and young people, and that could flow into the way in which we design our rest homes, for example, and that has an impact on how much energy we consume to keep us cool. and that puts up our emissions if they are carbon. So that just paints a little bit of a picture of where some of these impacts might cascade to, and therefore what we might do about them.
So, Judy, you are essentially saying that what is happening here will change how we live, where we live, the quality of our life, what we grow, what we farm. What sort of time frame are we talking about before the impacts are so significant that we have to have meaningfully responded, or we will be caught out?
Yeah, and that's going to vary depending on what the impact is. Now, if we think about the two most obvious ones, which have been talked about in the media this week already, is the sea level rise and coastal flooding, and also intense rainfall events, which have been happening right in the last week, right? And those two are the things that will affect us more immediately in the short term. We're very certain about sea level rise out to about mid-century. And the changes in the sea level rise will affect our ability to deliver the stormwater functions, the water functions of wastewater, etc. And so some of these things that we're already experiencing, whereas longer term there are impacts of temperature changes which may have a longer time frame for us to adapt to. So I think we have to have a conversation about what are the most important and present issues that we need to deal with. And so these are pretty serious decisions that we have to take now to build in the ability to adapt in the future and be flexible about that over time.
Are we taking those decisions? If I look back to the media conference you were at when your report was released in December, and you talked about, I guess the big issue is, are we being anticipatory enough? Are we reacting in advance to what we know is going to happen? Are we?
No. And we instinctively know these things will happen, but we have not yet adequately dealt with those issues.
That is Dr. Judy Lawrence. That is Dr. Judy Lawrence, who is Senior Research Fellow at the Climate Change Research Institute at Victoria University. Let's head to Ratana, where I suspect it has been very hot today. The Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern received a warm welcome at Ratana, and in a surprise gesture was gifted a name for her baby. The Labour leader was welcomed with a pōwhiri, along with other Labour, New Zealand First and Green MPs, with the church suggesting a middle name for her baby. It's Waru, which of course is the te reo word for 8. Our cameraman Richard Tindler and Māori Issues correspondent Mihi Narangi Forbes are in Ratana. Mihi is beaming in now live. Tēnā koe, Mihi, tell me about your day.
Tēnā koe, John. Well, it was here in the temple behind me this morning that the tūmoaki, which is the leader of the movement, his name is Haere Meihana, had the idea when he was baptising about 40 children from the movement that he would gift this very significant name to the Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern. But he held on to that little secret. He didn't tell anyone, and he told the world on the Pai today. What's in a name? Well, a century of history if it's Te Waru or Noema, the name gifted to the unborn child of the Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern today at Ratana. It means the 8th of November, the day the leader of the Ratana movement, T.W. Ratana, had his vision to unite his people. That vision started a movement and is today a large Māori religion. The movement's secretary, Piriwiritua Rurafe, explains.
Absolutely significant for the chairman of the church to use that special number that we all look forward to every year as the second name for the child of the Prime Minister.
Is it a name that lots of children from the Ratana movement have?
No, they're usually names like Anahera and Temepara, and so it's the first time that I've heard of a child being named Te Waru.
There was special mention of the relationship between the Labour Party and the Ratana Church, and partway through the ceremony, two women came to escort Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern and Minister Nanaia Mahuta to sit with the church and deliver her speech under the mahau or the porch. Following the pōwhiri, Ms Ardern spoke of her appreciation.
I certainly feel very privileged, the number of people who have made suggestions. I think we're starting to form a bit of a long list, but the suggestion today and in fact the entire welcome was warmly given. Yeah.
Around 200 accompanied the government's group today. Green Party co-leader James Shaw spoke about the Treaty of Waitangi and its significance. Many spoke of poverty, but Te Reo Māori was also on the table, with one of the Māori language exponents, Huirangi Waikerepuru, reminding the crowd how important the survival of Te Reo is. The announcement that the Prime Minister will speak on the marae at Waitangi in coming weeks was also discussed, but it seems the coalition, particularly those from the north, are in full support, with Winston Peters saying he'll wait to see exactly what the protocols will be.
Because we haven't seen exactly how that's going to be laid out, I think they're all being premature. But more importantly, cultures that don't adapt die. That's a fact, and Māori should come to grips with it.
His colleague Shane Jones agreed.
I think the mana whenua have the ability to adapt our culture, and it's not an easy step to take, but we're honouring the status of the Prime Minister in Ngāpuhi Nui Tonu. So no, I'm not particularly bitter and twisted about it.
The weight of the decision to speak lies with advisers, such as Labour Minister Peeni Henare.
I say it's a new world. It's a brave new world. We have a female Prime Minister, an amazing female Prime Minister that represents generational change. I've always been an advocate of having, allowing wahine to speak. I've always been an advocate of that.
Around the Ratana Pā, followers of the faith wore big smiles at the prospect that the Prime Minister's baby might share a special connection with their community, but only time will tell.
It was our Māori Issues correspondent, Mihinarangi Forbes, of course, at Ratana with our cameraman, Richard Tyndall. It's 27 minutes past 5 exactly. A 19-year-old who lost his leg in a fatal bus crash near Gisborne on Christmas Eve in 2016 has told the court how the crash destroyed his hopes and dreams. Talakai Aholele was driving the bus with 53 passengers from a Tongan brass band on board when it crashed through a barrier and down a bank, killing 3 people. In October, he pleaded guilty to 3 charges of dangerous driving causing death and 27 charges of dangerous driving causing injury. A short time ago, he was sentenced to 5.5 months home detention and had his licence suspended for 2 years. Sally Murphy was at the Waitakere District Court and joins us now live. Hi, Sally. Statements from victims and their families read out in court today. What did they say?
That's right. The court was absolutely packed with supporters for Mr. Olelele and also 14 people who have flown over from Tonga, including some of those who were on the bus and members of the victims' families. One person who was on the bus was 19-year-old Tavita Lokatui. He told the court that he was actually asleep in the aisle and awoke to children screaming just before the crash. He says he managed to crawl out of the broken bus when it was down the ditch, and that's when he realised he had significant damage to his leg. He got quite emotional as he told the court how when he was taken to hospital he had to get his left leg amputated above the knee. He also broke down when he told them that it's dashed all his hopes and dreams of ever joining the Tongan military and joining the Army's brass band. The court also heard impact statements from the parents of an 11-year-old boy, Sione, who died in the crash. His mother told the court, even though she has 9 children, Sione was a special boy and was definitely her favourite. She says that her once close family has been destroyed and that she visits his grave every day. His father also reiterated those comments, saying that any time someone mentions Sione's name in the family, everyone just breaks down and that they're really struggling to come to terms with the loss of their son.
So were there submissions made on behalf of or by the defendant today?
His lawyer, Mr. Tupou, reiterated the fact that his client is deeply remorseful and has shown that right from the outset, going to the funerals of the victims and offering the families traditional Tongan gifts. Mr. Tupou also mentioned and handed over a cheque for $36,000 from his client, which is going to be divvied up between the victims and those affected. He also mentioned that the bus company involved has actually just been charged by WorkSafe and is going to appear in the court next month.
And what did the judge say when handing down the sentence, Sally?
Well, Judge Jealous, she says the level of remorse and forgiveness in this case is deeply admirable. The court actually started today with a prayer and song, everyone sung, and also ended with a prayer. She mentioned that the restorative justice meetings have been deeply successful, and she hoped that now the sentence of 5.5 months home detention, 2 years loss of licence, and of course that cheque for $36,000 will allow everyone to move on and heal together.
Thank you, Sally. Sally Murphy at the Waitakere District Court. Coming up on Checkpoint, a new version of the TPP is one step closer. The school payroll system, NovaPay, raises its not always entirely attractive head again. This time they take a teacher to the debt collectors 3 years after a car accident saw her take 3 weeks sick leave, and more South Island councils consider chlorinating their water. We'd love to hear from you. Feedback really encouraged and welcome. Text us 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, Facebook Checkpoint with John Campbell, or email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. No next with business, but first Katrina with the headlines.
The driver of a bus which crashed on Christmas Eve 2016, killing 3 people, has been sentenced to 5.5 months home detention. The bus was carrying 53 people, including a visiting Tongan school brass band, when it plunged down a steep bank south of Gisborne. The driver, Talakai Aholale, has also paid $36,000 in reparations and lost his licence for 2 years. The New Zealand First leader Winston Peters says his party will now support the revamped TPP trade deal. At APEC last year, New Zealand negotiated charges that include restricting house sales to foreign buyers and altering clauses allowing investors to sue the government. The Greens will not vote for the enabling legislation, but National will give the government the numbers to pass it. A week-long heat wave has begun in Wanaka as the record-setting summer continues. Met Service is forecasting highs for the next week at or above 30 degrees as winds turn to the north over the South Island and combine to create foehn heating. NovaPay has referred a teacher to a debt collection agency because she owes money from 4 years ago when she was incorrectly paid sick leave. The teacher says she was paid 3 weeks sick leave by her school after she was in a car accident in 2014. The government took over the troubled pay system in 2014 after a series of problems. The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, and her government have been warmly welcomed on Te Ratana Pā, with the church even suggesting a middle name for her baby. Government and opposition MPs are at Ratana near Whanganui for the church's annual festivities celebrating its founder's birthday. The popular science fiction and fantasy writer Ursula Le Guin has died at her home in Portland, Oregon, aged 88. She wrote more than 20 novels and dozens of short stories, but is best known for the Earthsea series and The Left Hand of Darkness. Those are the headlines. I'm back at 6.
Thank you very much indeed. Let's turn to business news now with Nona Peltier. Hi, Nona. The jewellery retailer Michael Hill is giving up on his plans to develop retailer's plans to develop the United States market, and will also reposition the Emma and Roe brand. What's behind all of this?
Well, it's an interesting thing. The company had tried to develop a market in the United States for like almost a decade, like 9 years, and was losing maybe $2 to $4 million a year every year for all those years, and decided finally to pack it in. Also, Emma and Roe, that was a brand that they introduced, I guess, about 4 years ago, around the time that Michael Hill announced his retirement as chair of the board. So at that time, he announced this Emma and Roe, which was kind of the idea of bringing in sort of interesting jewelry items like baubles, kind of charms for bracelets. It didn't really take off, and it has cost them a lot of money. So they're going to reposition that and move that into a different kind of market, something they call demi-fine jewelry, which is basically fashion accessory, lower cost, but still fine jewelry, not the same as Michael Hill. But, it's an interesting thing because Michael Hill, when he retired, he said that what he wanted to see was that the Emma and Roe and the United States market was going to help them one day open 1,000 stores. That was his dream, with $1 billion of sales. Well, it turns out that's just not going to happen because times have changed for the retail market, and if it is going to happen in terms of sales and so on, a lot of it's going to be happening online. Bricks and mortar. That's yesterday's story, I think. So, yeah, interesting. And I asked the chief executive of Michael Hill what was next for the company. So we have a little bit of what he had to say.
Yeah, it was probably a very much a bricks and mortar vision in the days when online wasn't a key player, and so it'd be fair to say that our vision now is really more around growth in revenue and growth in channels, and not purely on a bricks and mortar. So I guess there is an equivalency to the business, but it may not be 1,000 physical stores. It may well be a much more balanced offering for both brands.
That's Michael Hill, Chief Executive. Phil Taylor talking to you earlier, Nona. How did the market react to this?
Well, actually, they loved it. The share price rose more than 5%. That's 7 cents.
Well, it wasn't working, and they're pulling back on it.
Yeah.
So,
Of course, that means they're going to cut their losses,
Yeah,
right? So,
right.
of course.
Yeah.
And so they finished up at $1.42, which is pretty good. Well, a 5% lift.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not a bad day's work if you can get it. The outdoor retailer Campbell also saw a lift in its share price today. I don't know why though. What was that about?
Well, they just announced a trading update. Oh, their New Zealand sales were a little soft, but the Australian sales were going gangbusters. So really, they've decided that their profit is going to be no less than $12 million for the first half. That's up from $10 million last year. And sales were softer in New Zealand, but pretty good in Australia. And so the market liked that. Their share price rose nearly 1% by 2 cents to $2.41.
What else happened on the markets today?
So overall, our market rose 0.2%. And Asia's been very strong as well. So what? That's 16 points up to 8,324. And our New Zealand dollar is also up today. It's been at 73.7 US cents. That's pretty high. And 92 cents Australian and, 52.5 pence.
Nona Peltier joining us with the business news in the Auckland studio. Thank you very much indeed. Weather is a big talking point everywhere. Let's get the latest on it from Met Service meteorologist John Law. Kia ora, John.
Kia ora. It is looking like a bit of a cloudy start to the day in Auckland, with perhaps a few spots of early morning drizzle to get rid of as well. But for most of us, it is a dry day with some decent spells of sunshine forming it in the afternoon. Temperatures up to around about 27 degrees Celsius. There'll be more cloud though from across the northern and western parts of the North Island, and still some showers to watch out for, especially for those inland parts of the Bay. Plenty down towards Rotorua and across towards Taupō as well. It's a cloudy start for Wellington once more, but we should find some afternoon sunshine and temperatures back up to around about 25 degrees Celsius. But for the best of the temperatures, head across towards the eastern side of the North Island, with highs of around 32 for Gisborne and similar values down towards the Wairarapa as well. Now for the South Island, there's plenty of dry weather around Canterbury. We will find a bit more cloud through the afternoon and a few showers across the more inland parts, but temperature-wise, still very warm, highs of 30 degrees Celsius. We are going to find plenty more sunshine in the far north as well for Nelson and across towards Marlborough. More cloud on that western coast and some showers feeding in towards the south. And that's it from me.
Thanks, John. 33 in Masterton, 30 in Christchurch, 32 Gisborne, 30 Blenheim. They are some temperatures. Thought NovaPay issues were over. Well, they ain't. The payroll system, which the government took over in 2014 after a series of problems, is still plaguing teachers on occasions. Teachers are receiving letters from NovaPay telling them they were overpaid years prior, often 3 or 4 years ago. And they're being told they have to pay that money back. Now, Checkpoint has seen multiple comments from teachers saying they were surprised when NovaPay contacted them about historical overpayments and demanded they pay it up. Many negotiated to pay it back, drip feed it, $10 or $20 per pay. Some spent years paying it back. But one story in particular caught our attention. Anne was in a permanent full-time teaching position in 2014 when she was in a car accident. Anne picks her own story up.
I was in a car accident and someone rear-ended me, and my injuries had me off work for 3 weeks. Apparently, I now know I only had 2 weeks of sick leave owing to me, but the school just paid me the 3 weeks that I was off through NovaPay, obviously. And then 3 years after the accident, NovaPay got on to me and said, "Oh, you owe us just over $900. I'm like, "What?" And they investigated and came back and said it was about the accident that I'd had 3 years previous to that, and that I had to go to ACC and claim that money so that I could pay NovaPay back. I've just discovered through all my investigations, ACC won't give you, you can't claim from them after a year after the accident, but it took Nova Pay 3 years to realise they'd made a mistake. It's
Okay,
now
so
4 years
sorry.
ago.
So when was your accident? What year was your accident in? 2014?
Yeah,
And Nova Pay came to you when?
in April last year.
And now they're saying, we want
Now,
you
now they've put it onto a debt collection agency.
for $900 of sick leave that you were paid in 2014.
That's correct, yeah.
It's gone to a debt collection agency.
Yes.
And you can't go to ACC, which, had anyone thought about it, you could have done at the time, because more than a year has passed since the accident.
Absolutely correct. And I've been reading up to find out what my rights are. And on the teacher's site that you saw us discussing this, somebody commented that there's a law. If your employer does something and pays you too much, they have to alert you within a working week, that they've made that mistake so that you can pay it back. It doesn't state anywhere in there that they can send you to a debt collector 4 years later.
That's the Wages Protection Act 1983. I have the relevant section in front of me now, and you're quite right. They have 5 days to let you know an overpayment was made. So what are you going to do now?
I'm just not going to pay it. And if they try to take me to court, I will be showing them that act that we've just been discussing and saying, hey, I'm not, because it's not like I did anything wrong. The school made a mistake and paid me too much sick pay. Nova Pay didn't notice anything. Nobody told me to go to ACC, so I'm pretty sure if they take me to court, it's just going to be waived.
In the meantime, you are with a debt collection agency, which would affect your credit rating, wouldn't it?
Goodness, I hadn't thought of that. Yes.
In other words, if you don't do something, the next time you go to apply for a credit card or any form of debts, they're going to say, hold on a sec, you have an unpaid thing here.
Oh, my gosh.
Have you contacted Nova Pay?
Teachers aren't allowed to. Only the wages clerk at a school can contact them. And so I gave both Nova Pay and the debt collection permission to call the school to talk to that wages clerk about it. And, yeah, nothing's been done.
That's Anne, who was speaking to me earlier this afternoon. The Ministry of Education has yet to provide a response to her situation, despite us contacting them multiple times. Today, NZEI President Linda Stewart urges teachers to negotiate with Nova Pay about making incremental repayments, just drip feeding on payday. She told us it's not good enough that Nova Pay is contacting people years after the payments were made, and the issue should have been sorted closer to the time. If you are a teacher or former teacher with a similar issue, we'd love to hear from you. The new version of the controversial TPP trade deal is one step closer, but even with New Zealand First now on board, the government will rely on the opposition National Party to get it over the line. New Zealand has renegotiated several provisions since the Labour-led government took office late last year. A news that's likely to be signed in March has been warmly welcomed by business, exporters in particular. The Greens are unmoved and refuse to vote for the enabling legislation. However, National will give the government the numbers. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
It's been touch and go for the 11-nation trade deal after the US pulled out and Canada played hardball at APEC last November. However, it's now back on track after talks in Japan, with member countries now working towards signing the deal on March the 8th. Speaking at Ratana, Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern said she talked directly to the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau last week about moving the deal forward and is pleased to see progress.
Obviously, there have been bumps in the road along the way with this agreement. So we wouldn't want to get ahead of ourselves in where the agreement stands now, but certainly this is another step towards the finalisation of that agreement.
National's trade spokesperson Todd McClay says his party's open to supporting the necessary legislation, but wants the government to release the details of the deal before it is signed.
The position of this government should be that the text is released. They, and particularly New Zealand First, were vociferous in their condemnation of National as a government around openness and transparency. I would be really surprised if they weren't going to release a text before signature.
As part of the renegotiated agreement, member countries have settled on less stringent rules under which investors can sue governments, but that has not satisfied the Greens leader, James Shaw.
We know that those have been limited, but the problem is that companies can shop around for jurisdictions to operate from, and so it just doesn't meet our threshold. Every party has to make up its own minds. I think one of the strengths of this government is that we can agree to disagree around certain issues.
After long opposing the deal, New Zealand First will now support it. Leader Winston Peters says his party would never have backed the protection racket advocated by the national government.
Well, because we were for the changes that we've managed to effect, this becomes a deal that we can support. But we were never going to support the sellout of our sovereignty, an investors' dispute procedure which wasn't fair. All those things have been changed now, so we can support it.
The Federated Farmers President Katie Milne welcomes news of the agreement and is urging politicians to give it their support.
It does have clear benefit for New Zealand Inc., so I'm sure that everyone will get on board. The Greens might still be outstanding, a couple of issues in it for them, but I'm sure that the majority will vote for it.
Campbell, the CEO of the Employers and Manufacturers Association, says there are broader implications than just the deal itself.
In spite of the anti-globalisation moves and Donald Trump and everything else, this signals that the connectivity story is alive and well and strong. And it also signals what I think is even more positive, the continuation of the bipartisan approach that we've had to trade here in New Zealand.
From here, member countries will work towards signing the deal in Chile in early March. After that, they have to ratify the deal. For New Zealand, that involves making sure the law restricting foreign house sales is in place and passing the enabling legislation. The deal would take effect 60 days after the deal has been ratified by at least 6 of the member countries. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Jane Patterson.
Several South Island councils are looking at permanently chlorinating their water to ensure it remains safe to drink. This comes only a day after the Christchurch City Council admitted some of the city's water wells could become contaminated and the city's famously pure water might have to be chlorinated. Logan Church has been looking at this for us.
More than 15 years ago, residents in the Timaru towns of Geraldine and Pleasant Point said no to chlorination. But now, Timaru District Council staff are seeking $200,000 as part of the upcoming budget to chlorinate both water supplies. Infrastructure Manager Ashley Harper says the gastro outbreak in Havelock North in 2016, which left dozens in hospital, changed people's minds.
I think the attitudes of the community is changing, especially when we understand what happened at Havelock North, and the whole community became ill within a few days, and we are recommending that we take steps to not let that happen in our district.
Geraldine and Pleasant Point's water is currently treated by ultraviolet light, which offers some protection. But Ashley Harper is worried about what happens to the water once it's past the ultraviolet light and is in the reservoirs and pipes. Using chlorine would fix any potential problem.
It means the water in the network has a small residual of chlorine. It's less than 1 part per million, and that means if there is an E. coli bug in the network for some unknown reason, then that bug here or there will be disinfected, and therefore the chance of water users becoming ill is significantly reduced.
Other councils are also looking at chlorinating their water. Before Christmas, the Queenstown Lakes District Council decided to temporarily chlorinate all of its water supplies over the summer, after high coliform counts were detected. The head of the council's infrastructure committee, Alexa Forbes, says the council will soon decide whether to continue chlorinating the water.
So the more I learn, the more I realise that we need to be chlorinating. I would love us to have the infrastructure to absolutely be able to guarantee delivery of beautiful, pure water to everybody's house. We don't have that infrastructure in Queenstown.
The move to temporarily chlorinate faced pushback from residents, including one Glenorchy woman who poured water all over the floor during a council meeting late last year. Alexa Forbes says she would personally prefer the water to be free from chlorine, but it would be too expensive to ensure it is safe.
As an infrastructure chair, I'm charged with something much greater than my own personal opinion, and it's the safety of a whole lot of people. It's health and safety. And actually, I don't even think I'd be very happy, knowing what I know, to not have the supply to my own house chlorinated.
The Waimasie District Council already chlorinates its water, but it is also seeking to upgrade their rural network. Its mayor, Craig Rowley, says the council is looking at spending up to $10 million on the upgrade as part of their long-term plan.
The Havelock drinking water inquiry has sort of brought it to the forefront. It's now time to put our boots on and get on and start getting some of this work done. We're looking at filtration plants on some of our rural water schemes, and we're looking at the best options around that, how that can be done most cost effectively.
The Christchurch City Council is expected to make a call whether to chlorinate its water at a meeting tomorrow. For Checkpoint, call Logan Church Tēnei.
10 minutes to 6, fairly full on first 50 minutes, so let's go somewhere else. Checkpoint can confirm the replacement for Neil Diamond's Mission Estate concert is not the Eagles. Neil Diamond announced he will retire from touring after a recent diagnosis of Parkinson's disease, meaning he won't be able to perform at his sold-out St Patrick's Day gig at the Hawke's Bay Winery. This is a really big affair. Lots of people coming from out of town. 25,000 ticket holders are now wondering if not Neil Diamond, who will it be? Gary Craft is the Australian event promoter for the concert, and we asked him who he thinks might replace Neil Diamond.
We're not really trying to find a replacement for him. We're trying to find an artist that people will like. For those people who have already committed to plans, who are looking forward to a weekend away, or a day at the Mission, because the Mission has a huge fan base and a huge following for the event itself, and for the day out. Those people that who particularly want to see Neil Diamond, they'll get full refunds. And those that are happy to continue and come to the lineup that we present, that'll be terrific.
And the thing with Neil Diamond is he was just such a sing-along artist, right? Such a sing-along live performer. I'm going to play Trivial Pursuit with you. I'm going to say the first line of a song, and you've got to say what follows it, right? Song Sung Blue.
Oh my God!
You must have been smoking too much reefer when you were listening to it, Gary. Well, come on, I'll give you an easy one. Sweet Caroline. What followed that? Sweet Caroline. Blood.
No, sorry.
Okay, well,
I didn't say I was a Neil Diamond fan. I mean, I'm a fan of his. I like a lot of the material, but I'm more of a fan of his work ethic and his quality of performance and his giving to his fans.
Yeah, well, and his ability to fill stadiums, right? But when I said Sweet Caroline, I reckon about at least half of our audience would have immediately started singing along. Good times never seem so good, and that's the thing, isn't it? That the thing people love about Neil Diamond is that you go along and you just sing with him, right?
Absolutely, and there was a nomination, an award he was given in America. There's a video of it a few years back where, and they were talking about exactly that and honouring him for his sing-alongs and the fact that that the audience knew the words and knew the songs and sang with him. Yeah.
Are you talking to anyone? Are you talking to people who have that kind of quality in terms of potential replacements?
Look, yes, absolutely. Now the difficulty is the short notice. I mean, we were advised about 2 hours before it hit the social media and the airwaves yesterday. And I know that he was doing, and his doctors were doing everything they could to try to get him into a position where he could at least do the New Zealand shows of the tour. But unfortunately, he's the adverse reaction to the medications have really put him in a situation where he can't travel, and he wouldn't be well enough to play the show. So he really did try to do everything to deliver, to his New Zealand fans, but it was just not to be in the end.
It's a heartbreaking story, really, isn't it? Because this is This is age. This is and how old are you, Gary?
I'm 62.
Yeah, right. I'm 53, and you know, we all grew up with Neil Diamond. Everyone listening, I suspect, has, even if you didn't really like him. He was the soundtrack to my childhood. You know, my mum and dad were, when I was a kid, his albums were probably on, along with Elton John and, you know, my mum's Joni Mitchell and Phoebe Snow and that kind of stuff. That was the soundtrack to my childhood.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. But also, you know, on the other side, that, you know, Parkinson's is a terrible, terrible disease that's affected many people. It's affected, you know, many people's families, and it's just an awful thing to happen to a person like that, you know. And that's another sad part about it, you know. I got a message this morning actually from my road traffic manager. And he unfortunately was at his mother's funeral yesterday, who died of Parkinson's, when the message came through. So, you know, it's everywhere, and it touches everyone.
Yeah, it does. It does.
It's just awful. It's a tough one.
Yeah, it is. Just before we go, who's the top of the list for potential replacements?
Can't tell you. Can't tell you.
Are you shopping in our neighbourhood? Are you talking to Kiwis or Aussies?
I'm talking to everyone. I was hitting the phones last night, talking to the world. But I have two that I'm strongly following at the moment, and I need about another.
Give us a clue. Give us a clue. Come on, Gary. You're amongst friends here, and bear in mind, you know, there'll be people listening who are going. So give us a clue.
No.
You miserable bugger.
We will share it as soon as I know.
Well,
but look, I am hopeful that we can find someone. I don't want to cancel the concert completely, because I know there you know, lots of people in Hawke's Bay and around New Zealand that love coming to the mission, and you know, whoever we choose, or if we can get someone and confirm them, they will be worth seeing. That's one thing I can guarantee.
It's an in-joke, and everyone has to forgive us all for this, but my boss is screaming in my ear, the Eagles, because she's trying to taunt me. You're not going to the Eagles, are you? Because no one sings along to the Eagles. They just play air guitar and then fall into a deep sleep. It's not the same as Neil Diamond.
That's exactly right. Well, you know, I haven't really caught up with you know, with the Eagles' current format. So we'll just have to see what happens with the Eagles, I think.
Gary Craft, Neil Diamond's promoter, who was bringing him to New Zealand for that mission concert and going to Christchurch as well, of course. We've just received a response from the Ministry of Education on our story about Novapay chasing teachers to pay back money due to overpayments years earlier. The following is a statement from Kim Shannon, who is Head of Education Infrastructure Service. Thank you, Kim. The potential use of a debt collection agency was always a last resort in cases where the person concerned has not entered into a suitable repayment arrangement. Novapay makes every effort to encourage employees to repay their overpayment and will tailor a repayment plan based on individual circumstances. The repayment plan for debt owed to schools must be agreed by schools. The standard overpayment recovery process is school employees are sent up to 3 letters advising the cause of the overpayment and the available options for repayment. As a last resort, the overpayment may be referred to the debt collection agency if no arrangement to repay has been agreed. If school employees believe they don't owe a debt, the best thing to do is contact the Novapay Debt Management Unit to discuss any questions or concerns, or check with their school administrator. Under the Limitations Act, there's a 6-year period in which the Ministry can review and collect the outstanding funds. There are no fees or penalties or interest added to overpayment debt. Lots of people commenting on that story, actually. The issue of the teacher being sued for sick leave payment seems bizarre. How could she, her GP and the school not have realised she was off due to an accident? So logically it would be covered under ACC. It's not Novapay's fault, it's hers and the school's. She should have claimed ACC. Tell Novapay the debt is in dispute, which means time allowed. Katrina Batten sneaking in behind me, which means it's 1 minute to 6, and we can fit in some more feedback. Kia ora, John. Winter and summer, our farm stock are left without any shelter, exposed to the elements. I think this is animal cruelty. Given your first topic tonight, are we happy for this exploitation to continue into the future, asks Erina. And John, hi, south of Martinborough today, which is of course in the southern Wairarapa, in that beautiful valley there, the temperature reached 38 degrees in the shade mid-afternoon.
I can imagine that.
Man, the greats will be working. They'll be earning their keep. Highest so far, says Ray Lilly Martinborough. Ray Lilly, who was my very first boss when I started at Radio New Zealand in 1989, Katrina Batten. You would remember him very well indeed.
Yes.
Head of News.
Hello, Ray.
Hello, Ray.
I used to do a lot of yelling, that's what I remember.
But justifiable and reasonable yelling.
Yeah, exactly.
Totally on point yelling.
Very.
Pips.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui, good evening. Ko Katrina Batten aho. The driver of a bus which crashed on Christmas Eve 2016, killing 3 people, has been sentenced to 5.5 months home detention. 66-year-old Talakai Aholale was behind the wheel when the bus, with 53 people on board, plunged down a steep bank south of Gisborne. The bus was carrying a school brass band that was on a 4-week fundraising tour from Tonga. Last year, Aholale pleaded guilty to 3 charges of careless driving causing death and 27 charges of careless driving causing injury. At the Waitakere District Court this afternoon, Judge June Jealous sentenced him to 5.5 months home detention and suspended his licence for 2 years. Aholale has paid $36,000 in reparations. This month is set to break the record for the hottest January in New Zealand history. The record-setting summer is forecast to continue with a week-long heatwave in Wanaka and a week of uncomfortably hot nights in Auckland. Last week, Invercargill recorded its hottest temperature on record at 32.3 degrees. A Met Service meteorologist Tom Adams says the summer has been exceptional.
We've seen quite a number of records broken for maximum temperatures, but also for longest runs of consecutive dry days. And it's looking very likely this January is going to break a lot of temperature records for the warmest January on record as well.
Tom Adams says there may be some rain late next week, but February is looking dry too. New Zealand First will now support the new TPP trade deal, saying the necessary changes have been negotiated. The 11 member countries will now work towards signing the deal on March the 8th, but the government will still need the National Party to get over the line. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
Last year, New Zealand negotiated changes including the ability of the government to restrict house sales to foreign buyers and to the clauses allowing investors to sue the government. The New Zealand First leader Winston Peters says his party would never have backed the protection racket advocated by the national government, but says enough changes have now been made. The Greens will not vote for the enabling legislation. National will give the government the numbers it needs, but wants the details to be released before the deal is signed. From Parliament, Jane Patterson.
Nova Pay has referred a teacher to a debt collection agency because she owes money from 4 years ago when she was incorrectly paid sick leave. Anne, who only wants to be known by her first name, told Checkpoint she was paid 3 weeks sick leave by her school after she was in a car accident in 2014. Nova Pay argued she should have been paid by ACC, but ACC won't accept the claim as it's more than 12 months since the accident. Other teachers say they've also been contacted by Nova Pay about historic overpayments and have negotiated to pay it off incrementally. Anne says she won't pay it as she's not at fault. The president of the Principals Federation says he's thrilled at a Taranaki school's move to axe voluntary donations and course fees, but warns most schools will not be able to follow suit. Waitara High School is believed to be the first secondary school to drop the payments. But Whetu Cormac says most school budgets are stretched and they're unlikely to be able to make a similar move. Mr Cormac says Waitara's move might be in response to the Labour Party's election promise to end school donations as part of a $4 billion revamp of the education sector. That campaign promise has not yet been implemented. Several South Island councils are looking at permanently chlorinating their water to ensure it remains safe to drink. Yesterday, Christchurch City Council revealed some of its wells could become contaminated and the water might have to be temporarily chlorinated. Before Christmas, the Queenstown Lakes District Council decided to temporarily chlorinate all the district's water supplies over the summer after high coliform counts were detected. The head of the council's infrastructure committee, Alexa Forbes, says it will decide in the coming months whether to continue chlorinating the water.
So the more I learn, the more I realise that we need to be chlorinating. I would love us to have the infrastructure to absolutely be able to guarantee delivery of beautiful, pure water to everybody's house. We don't have that infrastructure in Queenstown.
Alexa Forbes of Queenstown Lakes District Council. The Building and Construction Industry Training Organisation says the country's building boom is set to continue for a record 6th straight year. The Chief Executive, Warwick Quinn, says it's expected last year's consents will exceed the previous year's total, making it the 6th annual rise in a row. Mr Quinn says Auckland has enjoyed 7 years of continuous growth, while Northland, Waikato, Bay of Plenty, Taranaki and Otago have all had 5 years of growth. He says more than 65,000 construction workers will be needed over the next 5 years. The popular science fiction and fantasy writer Ursula Le Guin has died at her home in Portland, Oregon, aged 88. She wrote more than 20 novels and dozens of short stories, but is best known for the Earthsea series and The Left Hand of Darkness. She's credited with crafting fantastic worlds that grapple with difficult questions, from class divisions to feminist theory. It's 6:05. Sport, and the South Korean tennis player Hyung Chung is through to the semi-finals at the Australian Open. Ranked 58th in the world, Chung has beaten American and fellow unseeded player Tennis Sangren in straight sets in their quarter-final this afternoon. 21-year-old Chung plays the winner of tonight's last remaining quarter-final between defending champion Roger Federer and 19th seed Tomasz Berdych. Meanwhile, men's world number 1, Rafael Nadal, has slammed governing bodies over the hardness of court surfaces. Nadal suffered a thigh injury and was forced to abandon his Australian Open quarter-final with Marin Cilic in the 5th set. The Spaniard says the tour organisers are failing to protect players.
Too many people getting injured, so I don't know if they have to think a little bit about the health of the players, not for now that we are playing, but there is life after tennis. So I don't know if we keep playing in these very, very hard surfaces, what's going to happen in the future with our lives.
Rafael Nadal. Women's top seed Simona Halep is next on centre court for her quarter-final, and if she prevails, she'll play a quarter-final against 2016 champion Angelique Kerber, who earlier today cruised past American Madison Keys. And Tonga have renamed their National Rugby League competition after NRL star Jason Taumalolo. New Zealand-born and a former Kiwis player, Taumalolo made a late and controversial switch to play for Tonga at last year's World Cup. That's the news.
Tears? The American flag, and it's got #1 fan, and underneath it says, "We love Neil Diamond." Tradition?
Women shouldn't speak in the domain of Tūmatauinga, the god of war.
Trade deals?
Hallelujah is how I would put it. This is a big moment.
News you can trust. Morning Report with Guy and Espiner and Susie Ferguson, weekdays from 6.
Then on 9 to noon, new research suggesting it's not immigration but easy credit that's driven Auckland's housing market. And after 10, the challenges ahead for building robots that can live and work in our world. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met surface weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland fine apart from isolated afternoon and evening showers. Auckland to Taranaki, including Coromandel and Taumaranui, cloudy periods increasing, patchy drizzle tomorrow and isolated afternoon showers. Bay of Plenty, Taupo and Taihape, also Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, fine apart from isolated afternoon and evening showers, possibly thundery with localised downpours. Whanganui to Wellington, fine, but areas of cloud morning and evening and isolated showers inland today. Whited Upper Nelson and Marlborough, fine apart from afternoon or evening showers about the Marlborough Ranges, possibly heavy tomorrow. Bulla, cloudy periods. Westland, occasional rain, clearing tomorrow. Canterbury, fine, but cloud increasing later tomorrow with isolated showers, some heavy and possibly thundery. Otago except Clutha, cloudy periods and isolated showers, some heavy and possibly thundery tomorrow. For Fiordland, Southland and Clutha, occasional rain, and the Chatham Islands, occasional drizzle and fog. It's 8 minutes, so it's almost 9 minutes past 6, and it feels like it's going to rain in the studio because it's so hot here.
It's so hot in here. It's the aircon doesn't work.
No, it's very warm.
And yeah, it is absolutely ridiculous. Although that goes back to the point we were talking about earlier in the program, that the hotter it gets, the more we're going to want to use aircon, and of course then there, yeah.
We're doomed to be hot forever.
Yeah. Thanks, Katrina Batten.
Thank
Are you an
Jonathan.
Eagles fan?
No, not really, particularly. But I was a Neil Diamond fan.
Yeah.
Don't slag off Neil Diamond,
No,
John.
I didn't.
Oh, good, I'm just checking.
Yeah, excellent.
I do like the Eagles, though. They're okay. Not a fan, but I like them. Nice harmonies.
Thanks, Katrina. The principal of a Taranaki school, which has become the latest to scrap voluntary fees and donations, says he hopes it will relieve pressure on struggling families. Now, Waitara High School is believed to be the first secondary school to formally axe the payments. And it joins the ranks of Kahurangi Primary School in Wellington and Ross Intermediate in Palmerston North, which have also done it. Our Taranaki Whanganui reporter, Robin Martin, who has been on fire for checkpoints so far this year, has more.
A Decile 3 school, Waitara High has a roll of about $350 and typically raised between $30,000 and $50,000 a year in donations and fees. The school's principal, Daryl Warburton, says donations started at $120 a year, while fees were also collected for course-related costs and things such as trips and camps. Mr. Warburton says this could amount to hundreds of dollars and was a burden on parents.
For the hassle of asking that, and also we don't want to put guilt trips on parents. We think we're funded fairly to meet the needs of what we want to deliver, and so we thought it was just a complete waste of time asking for those things.
Mr. Warburton says he's committed to the concept of a free education.
We pay taxes so that our kids can have a free education, and I'm really happy to do that and really believe in that. So we wanted to try and take that load off parents. But yeah, sure, there's heaps of parents that can't meet them, and I don't want them to feel bad because they can't meet a donation that's kind of strongly implied, which many schools do.
Mr. Warburton believes it will take the school a minimal amount of belt tightening to make up for the shortfall. Mum of 5, Marcia Hawi Akinwumi, was at Waitara High today arranging the enrolment of her daughters Terena and Shekama. Miss Hawi Akinwumi says the school's new policy is wonderful.
Oh, that'll make a huge difference. It'll take a lot of burden off our shoulders. It'll take a lot of burden off our shoulders as parents. I think this should happen be introduced to other schools around New Zealand, to all schools.
Ms. Hawi Akinwumi says everyone in her family has had to make sacrifices for education in the past.
We have to go without as parents at times to provide the funding for our children to have a better education in life. Yeah, they have to miss out on camp. They had to miss out on a lot of things.
Kyron Smith is the principal of Kahurangi Primary, which has been completely free since opening its doors 5 years ago. Ms. Smith says it's been an eye-opener.
The experience for our families has been in the way of every child is getting to participate, and there's not the stress of them being able to afford the experiences they want their children to be involved in.
Ms. Smith says it's exciting to see a high school moving towards a free model.
Especially in secondary school, the children are probably making some of the decisions for their parents and not wanting to put that stress on their families. So they do protect their families from all the bills that they could get to participate.
The president of the Principals Federation, Fetu Cormack, says he's delighted with Waitara High School's move. Mr. Cormack thinks it might be in response to the Labour Party's election pledge to end voluntary donations via its $4 billion plan to revitalise the education sector. He warns, however, not all schools will be in a position to follow suit.
The reality is that unless school funding is increased, schools will increasingly be asked to ask their families to provide donations. So it's great that this school has made a commitment, but the fact is that many schools are not in that position to be able to do that.
Labour's campaign promise still needs to go through the Cabinet process and be considered alongside other initiatives for Budget 2018. I Waitara, mo te hōtaka o te ahiahi, ko Robin Martin aho.
I would really love your feedback on the story. If your school has ditched school fees or if it is being considered school fees and donations, do text us 2101. We'd like to talk to schools who are doing this. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, Facebook, Checkpoint with John Campbell, or email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. We don't have to use your name, but we'd love to talk to your school about it. So it may be that you want to email in checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. You're not going to believe this, but the front runners, according to your suggestions for replacements for Neil Diamond at the Mission Estate, are James Taylor, Alanis Morissette and Cliff Richard. Goodness gracious me. Barry says, harden up, John. How about shearing a sheep in a tin shed with the outside temperature over 30 degrees today? You're right, Barry. I would be bloody useless at that. We're going to keep looking at the weather. If you are looking for some breezy relief from the scorching temperatures around the country, you could be out of luck. There is a nationwide shortage of fans. It comes as the warm weather looks set to continue. Wanaka is in the midst of a heat wave, and Auckland has faced a week ahead of uncomfortably hot nights where temperatures are expected to only get as low. The low will be 22, 23 degrees. As Ryan Quinn reports, most of the big online retailers have sold out of fans nationwide.
Good morning, how can I help?
Oh, hi there. Just wondering whether you've got any fans in stock.
No, I'm sorry, we don't.
Oh, any sign of them coming back?
No.
Kmart in Auckland's St Luke's is not alone. As the country basks in record heat and humidity, those trying to create an airy shelter from the swelter are finding themselves out of luck.
Fans in
Fans?
stock?
No, I'm sorry, we're completely out of stock.
We have like a hot wave of weather and they're all gone. No, I think most places sold out a couple of weeks ago.
I know, they've gone crazy this year.
Of the dozen or so stores RNZ called, we found only one, Bunnings in Dunedin, still stocked with standard electric fans. Those desperate for some breeze can still get it if they're willing to pay the price. Farmers' current online stock starts at a cool $750 for a top-of-the-line bladeless model. And if you really want to go the extra mile, Bunnings points out in a statement, it does still have ceiling fans and air conditioning units. The demand is sparked by a mass of hot, settled air that's made its home above the country and is going nowhere fast. The Met Service's John Law explains more.
We've found our temperatures across the North Island, 18, 19, 20 degrees Celsius for our minimum temperatures. And so those hot days after those warm nights mean there's no respite and things just haven't been cooling down at all.
Temperatures in the next few days are expected to hit the 30s all along the country's east coast. And even the words he uses feel stifling.
Over the next week or so, we've still got that same warm, humid air mass sitting over us. There's no real change to the setup. And until we get that next cooler southerly to come through, we're not going to find things changing very much at all. So we've got more of these warm and sticky nights to come, and more of these high temperatures through the daytimes.
On a humid 27-degree day, not all of these Aucklanders need a fan to keep cool.
Just wear shorts and singlets on the weekend.
Air conditioning mostly. And if it gets too hot, I pour cold water over my head. And in the really hot weather, I put wet t-shirts on to keep cool.
We have a lot of fans going, a lot of windows open. We don't get any bugs, so we just keep the windows open, good airflow and stuff like that.
Go for a swim after work. That's it.
Those in search of cool air need not worry about the fan shortage becoming a fan crisis. Bunnings and the warehouse both say they'll have more fans in stock from next week. Mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi ko Rowan Quinn tēnei.
A late runner in the Mission Estate is John Farnham. Pip is taunting me. Each to their own. 18 minutes past 6. School isn't back yet, but with just 7 weeks until Polyfest, the largest Pacific secondary school dance festival in the world, there is work to be done. Nearly 100 student leaders gathered in South Auckland today to set the tone after fights outside the event last year overshadowed the real successes on stage and dominated media coverage. Our ethnic development reporter, Laura Tupou, reports on today's get-together.
Building relationships, embracing the culture, enhancing traditions, teaching culture to anyone who's willing to learn, and just embracing who we are.
Year 13 student leader at Marist College, Melania Uatafe, knows what Polyfest means to her. She's just one of 93 students who slipped on her uniform a week early to resume their roles as Pacific leaders. The festival's director, Seulitere Leo Mao, says it's the first time a leadership day has been organised, and one of the reasons is to address the fights that circulated on social media after last year's 4-day event.
This is probably one of those things. As we're doing Leaders' Day, we've got the New Zealand Police here trying to push the safety message that they need to own it, they need to keep it safe with us. We've also got a social media expert coming in today to talk to them about keeping themselves safe online. Pull out your phone to do something positive rather than filming a fight.
The county's Manukau District Pacific Liaison Officer, Romeo Changsun, says he doesn't want the same distraction this year.
So we just want to make sure that the students are out there enjoying themselves, being proud about where they're from, and obviously not taking it to that next level.
And that's exactly what the students want. There were 2 arrests at last year's event which were unrelated to the fights and a drop in the ocean compared to the 90,000 strong crowd who attended. But the students today are looking forward, and some schools have already got the ball rolling.
We've started our practices because we just decided that since poly is so early, we should have as much time as possible, and so we've rounded everybody up and we've not started those serious, hard out, sweating practices. It's just those run-through ones and establishing the ground rules and
Jade Mamea Etuata says she's taking her leadership role in the Nuean group seriously.
For all of us, I want us to just achieve coming across to our group as a solid front. I want to seem united, and so that the people we're leading have faith in us, that they believe we can lead them properly and to a placing or to a win, either one.
Who's your biggest competition?
I think our biggest competition would probably be La Salle, mainly because they're always taking it out.
Tongan student leader Mani Tafa says they're leading the way.
Like young Pacific people at our school, they tend to shy away from leadership roles because of who they are, but now that they see us up there and stuff, not really up there, but now that they see us having roles and stuff, they know that they have the potential and everything, so yeah.
Chatting to students today, I discovered the school to look out for, in the boys category anyway, is De La Salle College from Mangere East. They attend every second year and consistently take out many of the top prizes. And this year, they're back, but they're not giving anything away.
Yeah, what can you say? It's I think it's just the leaders. It comes down to the leaders and just having fun.
And who is De La Salle keeping an eye on?
Our biggest competition will probably be St. Peter's.
But after sharing kai and empowering the students, it's theirs to make their own.
I want this year to be memorable for not just myself, but everyone else that I know and that everyone else that I will come to know. I just want it to be an experience because everyone in my whole life has been telling me, oh, you're going to miss it, you're going to really miss it, you're going to wish you're year 13 again. And I just want to heed that advice, make the most of everything.
Polyfest will start on the 17th of March at Manukau Sports Bowl. For Checkpoint, ko hokohingoa ko Laura Tupou.
A beautiful story, Laura, and I should say Laura shot and edited that story as well as reporting it. Thank you. Hilarious feedback coming on replacements for Neil Diamond. So you're hoping for the cleanest the icon to replace Neil Diamond at Mission, are you, John? This is Stephen of Raumati Beach. Damn straight, Stephen, I am. John, I would love to see the Flaming Lips play, said Megan. Some fantastic listeners have texted in Tiny Ruins. Swit it. Aldous Harding and Sharon Van Etten. They all have the same phone number and it's mine, tragically. And someone suggested Gordon Lightfoot. Gordon Lightfoot, goodness gracious me. Finally tonight, we admit this next interview is designed to send you to sleep. But how can you sleep when it is too darn hot? Science says when temperatures get to above 23 degrees, we start to struggle. Oh, we've skipped one. I'm just taking my earpiece out because I'm getting so much abuse. It's not finally tonight. Oh dear, ladies and gentlemen, it's Gordon Lightfoot thoroughly discombobulated me. Right. Back on the tracks. A dog breeder is biting back at suggestions that all pet sales should be banned on Trade Me. The sales of some dog breeds, pugs and British and French bulldogs, will no longer be allowed on the auction website from March. But the animal rights group Poor Justice wants a blanket ban to ensure all animals are bred and cared for in humane conditions. Actually, this is a story that's already getting lots of feedback. Sophia Ducker-Jones reports.
The co-founder of Poor Justice, Craig Dunn, says he's come across cases of puppies and kittens being ill-treated. He says Trade Me should take a lead from overseas giants like Amazon and eBay.
These people are commercial breeding these animals with no rules, no regulations around it, and the animals are suffering. When these animals come into the vets, they are riddled with problems, and it's costing them thousands of dollars. And these people who are selling these puppies are very unethical around it. It's all about profit.
Trade Me has an animal code of welfare where pet sellers can vouch their animals are in good health, but it's only voluntary. Craig Dunn says there needs to be compulsory regulations for commercial breeders.
If they're going to breed commercially, then there need to be some rules and regulations around it of how many litters that breeding bitch can do. You know, whether it's 1 to 2 litters and that's it. So when these puppies are locked in a cage, they've never touched grass in their life, these breeding bitches, and then they're forced to breed.
Gina Bryce is a Waikato dog breeder with the New Zealand Kennel Club and disagrees. She says she always does thorough checks on people she sells her puppies to.
I personally have a form that I will email a prospective buyer, and it asks them things like, have they researched the breed? Are they aware of any tests that should be done prior to purchasing the breed?
Gina Bryce says Trade Me is the best way to sell pets.
It's a way for people to easily contact. You know, it's one click and they're in contact with you. It's a way for them to view photos. They can compare prices with other similar dogs for sale to get a feel for, you know, what's an expected price.
Trade Me's policy and compliance leader James Ryan says cases of animal mistreatment on its site are rare, but if they do find one, it's referred to the SPCA. But he admits it's not possible to do background checks on all pets sold online.
You know, we have many animal welfare groups out there that use the site to rehome animals that are lost and found or whatever and need new homes. The history of those animals is unknown, so we can't hold these responsible sellers and rehomers to that high standard when we just want to get these dogs a new home.
Today, Trade Me had more than 11,500 dogs and nearly 3,000 cats listed for sale. For Checkpoint, this is Sophia Duckle-Jones.
New suggestions for Massive Attack or the Gordons? Goodness gracious, the Gordons. Helen Reddy, Judith Durham, the Seekers. Thank you, everyone. It's been really fun receiving these texts. Right, finally tonight we admit this next interview is designed to send you to sleep. I'm having deja vu if I read that. But how can you sleep when it's too hot? Science says when temperatures get above 23 degrees, we do struggle to sleep. You may have come to dread nights, the mozzies, the humidity. Dr. Karen O'Keefe from the Sleep Wake Research Centre at Massey University, Dr. Karen O'Keefe, has some tips. And what's the ideal temperature to nod off?
There are a few things that we can try. One of the things is to try and trick the body into going through the cooling down process that we naturally go through every evening. And so if we can heat our body up slightly with a bath or a shower and then cool down over an hour or so, then we can maybe trick the body into being able to get off to sleep a bit easier. The other strategies are really practical ones and probably obvious ones to most people, but trying to cool down the bedroom before you go to sleep, so making sure you get heat out of your house with open windows and things like that. Maybe a fan in the bedroom. Some people have heard of using things like cold towels or cold hot water bottles or even frozen hot water bottles. And in theory, those things probably work to help cool yourself down. I'm not quite sure about using wet products in the bed and whether that would actually impact on your sleep a bit later on in the night. So something to think about anyway.
Sorry, so you have a hot shower rather than a cold shower before you go to bed?
Yes, not too hot, but just heat yourself up a little bit so that your body's temperature starts to go through that cooling process, and it can help mimic the natural body clock type process that we've actually got in the evening.
Why does temperature disrupt our sleep? In other words, if we're tired enough and it's not 50 degrees, which would be really ridiculous, why can't we sleep when it's in the mid-20s, for example?
Well, I don't think me and internationally, we understand that question terribly well. We know that once it gets over about 23 degrees, we really start to struggle. And we know what happens to sleep in that we wake up really frequently, and most people will be well aware of that, and that our deep sleep and our REM sleep stages are reduced, so we have less of those. But in terms of why, probably because we don't regulate or control our temperature very well during sleep, so we can sweat and shiver quite a lot easier. And also, let ourselves get a lot hotter than we normally would during the day before we start to respond with sweating. So therefore, it sort of gets a little bit out of control, and we sort of flip between getting too hot and too cold during the night.
Gosh, people must be talking to you a lot at the moment. Does everyone want advice from you on how to get a better night's sleep?
I've answered a few questions.
I bet you have. How are you sleeping yourself?
Miserably. We're in Wellington here, so it's been quite humid, and humidity exacerbates the problem. But yeah, it's been a restless few nights for me as well.
Extraordinary. If you could pick a temperature to sleep in, what would be the ideal?
We know that it's between about 13 and 23 degrees Celsius. It sounds like a bit of a coincidental temperature range, but that's the one that the research suggests. It's
Dr. Karen O'Keefe from Massey University. So much feedback coming in on replacements for Neil Diamond, Tony Bennett, Rufus Wainwright, John Fogarty, John Cougar Mellencamp. And I think you're right, he's not Cougar anymore. John Mellencamp, Steve Miliband. Someone asking if I'm drunk. I'm as sober as a judge. I promise it is just very, very hot in the studio. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's been a gorgeous engagement. We really appreciate hearing from you. On behalf of our excellent and thoroughly sober team, that is Checkpoint for this evening. Have a wonderful evening. We'll be back tomorrow night at 5.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. This month is set to break the record for the hottest January in New Zealand history, with a week-long heatwave forecast for Wanaka. The driver of a bus that plunged down a bank south of Gisborne in 2016 has been sentenced to 5.5 months home detention. New Zealand First now supports the new TPP trade deal, but the Greens remain opposed, meaning the government will still need the National Party to get it over the line. The Greens leader has thanked the Ratana Church for its message of unity. James Shaw was part of a government contingent invited onto the pa this morning to join the movement's annual festivities. And police have confirmed the remains of a human body were found in a burnt-out house truck at Lake Hawea yesterday. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Tears? The American flag, and it's got #1 fan, and underneath it says